let's open up the mailbag. And we'll take this question from David. The day after 9/11, our servile Western media outlets continually showed Palestinian people dancing and rejoicing in the streets as if they were celebrating the events that took place that horrible day. Was that footage taken completely out of context? It seemed to me as if our media was trying to frame a specific narrative in order to show how barbaric and criminal the Palestinians can be, thus giving the Israeli army all the more reason to continue their ethnic cleansing.
Right. Yes. Yes. The short answer is yes, the footage had nothing to do with Palestinians celebrating 9/11. We can get a couple of handles on this. One from History Commons. The excellent History Commons has this entry on that specifically. Television news coverage on 9/11 repeatedly shows images of Palestinians rejoicing over the 9/11 attack. According to Mark Crispin Miller, a professor of media studies at New York University who investigated the issue, the footage was filmed during the funeral of 9 people killed the day before by Israeli authorities. He said to show it without explaining the background and to show it over and over again is to make propaganda for the war machine and is irresponsible. So that's one part of that footage that they were showing over and over and over. The other part was, well, we can pick this up again. There's an excellent overview article that I'll link to in the show notes that has a lot of different links. One of the links is to a book called The Fraud of the Fraud. Have you been taken for a ride? And that book notes, Annette Kruger-Spitta of ARD, German Public Broadcasting TV magazine Panorama, stated that inspection of the unreleased complete tape of that footage shows the street around the celebration was quiet, and a man in a white t-shirt is noticeable for inciting the children and is fetching new people again and again. The woman who is remembered for her cheering, whose name is Noel Abdel Fattah, later stated she was offered cake if she celebrated on camera. At the time, she was unaware of the 9/11 attacks and said she was frightened when she saw the pictures on television of how she was being portrayed to the world. And then that book goes on to reproduce a Spiegel article, which I haven't checked. I think it's available still online, but if it is, I'll throw it in the show notes. Anyway, it's reproduced in that book that's talking about that ARD investigation in more detail. And the other part of this is there was, at the same time as this was being debated, there was a canard thrown out by some Brazilian researcher who said, no, this is footage that was taken 10 years ago. They were saying it was taken in 91, but that timeline didn't add up. And some people said, no, it was 1990, and other people were saying, no, it was 1993. That is a blind alley. No, this was not taken in the 1990s. It was from around that time, but it had nothing to do with the celebration of 9/11. And that's again, it's a perfect example of how media manipulation gets people ready for war. And that's another example of how 9/11, war on terror, war in the Middle East all go together in this big package. And 9/11 truth is well, I don't know what's the best metaphor. It's the bow that if we unwrap, the whole present comes out, which is the present of the truth, which unlocks all of the propaganda and crap that's been built around this for so long.
On the day of 9/11, clips were played on CNN, Fox News, and NBC of Palestinians allegedly dancing in the streets, celebrating the 9/11 attacks.
However, while some Palestinians were taking to the streets in apparent celebration, one youth was quoted as saying, as he received sweets handed around in celebration, "This is a sweet from Osama bin Laden," he said.
Throwing candy, distributing candy to passers-by. The U.S. government obviously has become...
They're celebrating. Wreck their lives. Wreck their lives. For once, allow us... Whether you need Israel to do it or the United States to do it, I don't care which.
You know, to me, that alone is a reason to bomb them.
Yet there was no context offered for how or why this footage was recorded, or even why it was aired in the middle of a national emergency, while thousands of New Yorkers were still struggling to find out if their loved ones were alive or dead.
Jumping up and down, celebrating.
5-year-olds. Those 5-year-olds will grow up to attack our children.
They're showing it right now.
Kill them.
And for 4 hours before bin Laden was blamed on television, the attacks themselves were blamed on the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
A Palestinian group has claimed responsibility for the plane crashes into the World Trade Center. This is a group called the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
One Palestinian organization is claiming that the responsibility identified as the Palestinian group, the DFLP.
There has been a claim of responsibility, according to the Reuters news agency, from something called the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Don and Fred probably picked up on this. and they understood that reality didn't matter. It was perception of reality that was more important.
How would the American people respond to the kind of war you are advocating?
Enthusiastically.
Enthusiastically, you
I
said.
believe that they would. There's every evidence that the American people are right now very enthusiastic for attacking the sorts of people who are capable of even thinking about doing these kinds of acts.
Palestinian organizations has been involved in violence before. It is the first organization to claim responsibility for this.
Arab and Muslim communities in the U.S. and Canada are feeling a growing backlash over the New York and Washington terrorist attacks.
Look at NBC.
Kill them
Channel
for
4.
celebrating. Kill them.
In their schools, at 5
Look,
years
there
old,
they
they're
are.
being
Here
indoctrinated.
they are. They're all celebrating in the streets. The Palestinians are celebrating in the streets, ladies and gentlemen. They're putting up the victory sign. Children are cheering. Today, drop the nuclear bomb on them.
There's no reason for those people.
Give them nuclear warfare. It's the only thing they understand. Like the bastard children they are.
Palestinians were taking to the streets in apparent celebration.
Don and Fred knew full well that Palestinians had absolutely nothing to do with the attacks, but they took advantage of the intense emotional climate to plant the seeds that Palestinians were actually our enemies.
I didn't say that we know exactly who conducted this attack. There are a few groups out there that are dedicated to conducting exactly this sort of attack, and I said that we should attack those groups regardless of whether we know exactly which one specifically conducted this.
And the groups